Welcome to the channel, guys. We are back again for another top 10 fall fragrance list, and this is the niche edition. So stay tuned for that. And if you like fragrance reviews, top 10 lists, cologne comparisons, and first impressions, hit that subscribe button for more great content. So the niche version of this list, this is what this is going to be. I will admit I do kind of generally enjoy this more than the designer list. Not that I dislike designer fragrances, but you know, there's just so much more variety, so many more options when it comes to niche fragrances, and that's why I do tend to prefer them. But I did make a designer list. If you missed that, do check it out. And you know what? We're just going to get right into it with the niche list, and we're going to start off with one of my favorite honey fragrances, one that doesn't actually get talked about too much. It does get talked about a little bit, and that is Slow Dive. So on the opening, this one did actually remind me a little bit of Bee, although this one did come first. So if you do kind of like Bee, you probably will like this one. It does have a similar kind of waxy honey vibe, but it does go in quite a different direction, where I find Bee is a little bit more floral. This one definitely does take on this very sweet, sensual aspect of honey, does come off a little bit more of a thick gourmand fragrance, especially as this one moves into the mid. I did actually do a comparison video of those two if you want to check it out, but Slow Dive for me is really great honey fragrance that not a lot of people do talk about. And if you do like a little bit more of a gourmand feel to your fragrances, Slow Dive is absolutely one to check out. So that is the number 10 spot. And for the number 9 spot, we have none other than Saddle. Now, I have talked about this one several times. I wanted to bring this one back. This was actually my scent of the day. It is actually getting a little bit cold here in Europe already, a little bit cloudy. So, you know, the thicker fragrances are definitely becoming a little bit easier to wear. But in either case, Saddle, it's a really nice, interesting, sweet leather fragrance. So if you do like leather fragrances, if you want something that's fairly leather forward, this is definitely one worth trying out. And it does manage to be quite different because the sweetness comes a lot from butterscotch, a little bit of a caramel too, I believe. And it does make a very nice and interesting fragrance. The leather in this one, very luxurious, very high-end feeling. It does feel like a very refined, expensive piece of leather with that nice sweetness over top. So this is a really nice one, very interesting. If you don't like the smell of butterscotch, of course, don't check this one out. Butterscotch to me is the most prominent note in this fragrance, followed by that nice, luxurious, rich feeling leather. So, next one on the list, I've talked about this one a little bit, and it's one I actually really enjoy from Mansera, and that is Oud Vanille. I really like this one a lot for the dry down. Now, the opening is also nice. It comes across as a very nice, spicy, woody fragrance. I don't really get much of the vanilla feel in the opening, but what I do get in the dry down is this really beautiful toasted vanilla. Now, this one does apparently have Madagascar vanilla in it. I know this is a very expensive and very hard or rare version of vanilla. Some people do consider it to be the best, and it is the same vanilla that is in Wicked Good. So you do get a very similar dry down between those two fragrances, this one being a lot less expensive. And it does to me come across like a nice, warm, cozy, toasted, almost marshmallowy kind of a feel. Very enjoyable, very relaxing, very soothing. So I do like that about the fragrance. It just has this very inviting toasted vanilla dry down. So the next one, a newcomer to the list, another newcomer, of course, had to put it on because it is, of course, new, but also really nice, and that is Vert by Kilian. So this one is modeled after the idea of absinthe, and I do definitely get a boozy opening, although it reminds me a lot more of ouzo, which is a boozy drink made in Greece, and it is, I believe, made with anise, which is also a very licoricey smell. So I do definitely get some of that vibe in the opening. That nice boozy licorice vibe is enveloped by a nice sweetness. It does actually come across like sugar, like granulated sugar. So they do really give you that experience of say, pouring water over the sugar to mix in with the absinthe and sort of create that experience of drinking absinthe. Now, the dry down on this one, actually, I will say, now the opening, the mid, to me, very original and afterthought, and somebody did also pick up on this on my YouTube video for this video. For this fragrance, the dry down does kind of remind me of something like Carlisle. You get a little bit of a pungent, chocolatey, sweet patchouli vibe, a little bit woody, a little bit creamy with that sandalwood, I believe it is. And so it does have a bit of a familiar dry down, but it is still a very nice dry down. So fairly unique fragrance overall. There is a little bit of overlap with other fragrances, but I still do really like this one. The performance is a little bit not the best, although it seems okay. I would like it if this one is a little bit longer lasting, a little bit punchier, just because it is most certainly a fall winter kind of a fragrance, and I find those ones, you know, I look for or prefer ones that do perform a little bit better, especially if you're going to be out in the cold. Nonetheless, really nice release. If you like that boozy licorice kind of vibe, definitely one worth checking out. If you're not a fan of licorice, you will probably want to pass on this one. Now, next one. This is one that's been talked about a lot, hyped up a lot, and you know, I think for good reason. It is a really, really nice, nice fragrance, and that is Vanille Havane. This is just such a nice sort of boozy tobacco, cocoa-y scent that does have, you know, it does have this very warm, sensual vibe to it. To me, the tobacco is not overly powerful in this one. But it does certainly have a little bit of tobacco to give it a little bit of intrigue. It is a little bit boozy in the opening, moving into the mid, but not overly. And of course, that cocoa-y, vanille kind of a feel that it does have is also very, very nice. It has this nice, warm, chocolatey feel. So I do really like that one, and absolutely think it's one worth checking out. Price is a little bit high, but it is a niche fragrance, and I think with the performance, with the quality, it is worth it. Although personally, I would probably hope to be able to find it on the gray market, get a good price on that. But that is just kind of, I guess, the deal hunter in me. Anyways, next one, another licorice fragrance. So if you're not a huge fan of licorice, or it is, I believe, anise in this one. And this is Black Vines by Kerosene. It does have some nice green vibes in it as well, but it is one that to me is very dominated throughout by this anise kind of a feel. And something about the anise really gives me, at least me personally, it does have a little bit of a mysterious feel to it. And I do really like that about fragrances that take advantage of anise or licorice. There is just something dark, mysterious about it that I think works really, really well. And this is one, although I know Kerosene is overall not talked about a lot, I'm a huge fan. This is one from their house that is definitely one of the ones that is not talked about, but I think it is one worth checking out if you're into those kinds of fragrances. So do not overlook it at all. In my opinion, a fantastic release from the house and worth checking out. Moving forward on the list, one of my favorite fragrances and one that I would definitely consider buying in the future from a brand that also not talked about a ton, and that is Acro Awake. If you like coffee fragrances, this is potentially the best. I know a lot of people talk about, followed by Kerosene. That's one of the Kerosene fragrances that's hyped up a lot, and that is a really, really good fragrance and a really good coffee fragrance. But I also really think Awake is amazing. A lot of people might even find it better. I find that, you know, Kerosene starts off like a nice dark roasted coffee and does get a lot sweeter, kind of like a mocha-y kind of a feel to it, which is really great. But Awake is a little bit different. To me, it smells like a really rich Colombian coffee. Very robust, not full on dark, but it's definitely not as sweet, and I don't get as much sweetness. So if you want something that's a little bit less on the sweet side, I think Awake is a really good choice. And, you know, a good coffee fragrance, I think, is very hard to find. You either find, or at least I either find, that the coffee note doesn't last that long, or the coffee note isn't the main player of the fragrance. And so you know, fragrances like Follow or Awake are a really, really nice change of pace if you're really looking for that coffee forward fragrance, and this is absolutely one of them. So definitely worth checking out. Acro brand that's not talked about too much, but they do have a lot of really great fragrances. So top 3. The next one, Pink Marc du Champagne Truffles. I want to say Truffles is the last word. It's a very long name, but this is a really interesting fragrance that does open a lot like, you know, Dolce Passione, I believe is the name of the fragrance. It does have this really nice, rich, dark, truffly, chocolatey feel to it in the opening. Very, very realistic. Reminds me a little bit of these candies that I sometimes would eat around Christmas time. Has this very nice, dark, almost bitter kind of chocolatey, robust, truffly feel. It does actually get a little bit boozy in the mid, and that's one of the interesting things about it. I think Pink Marc du Champagne is like a kind of brandy or something like that. And so you do get this boozy, more of a rummy kind of a feel in the mid. And I also find one thing that's interesting about it is that a lot of boozy fragrances are boozy in the opening, and that dissipates a lot. Where this, in the opening, very chocolatey, turns into a more of a boozy fragrance. Of course, returns a little bit more to this gourmand, chocolatey feel that it has. And the booziness kind of subsides. But a really, really nice fragrance, a great release, and one that is worth checking out if you like those sort of chocolatey, boozy fragrances for sure. And it does, with that booziness and with even moving into the dry down, the way it, you know, the truffle plays out, it does certainly differentiate itself from Dolce Passione. So it doesn't smell exactly like it, but it is very reminiscent right on the opening. So still worth checking out if you do own Dolce Passione. It's quite a bit different overall, but you may like it nonetheless. So next one, name way too long for me to attempt to actually say. Roasted coffee something or other, whiskey something, Stranger Perfumery. It's a very, very long name, but it is actually a really, really nice fragrance. So this one does have coffee, it has tobacco, it has boozy notes, has a little bit of popcorn in there too, which is a little bit interesting. I do pick up a little bit on that popcorn. I do get a little bit of this hay-like feel at sometimes, along with a nice boozy tobacco. Now I do find the coffee is actually not that prominent, which I was expecting a little bit more. And this again is something that I find with a lot of coffee fragrances. Coffee is not the most dominant. I get way more tobacco, a little bit more of that sweet hay-like feel, and more of that booziness than I do with the actual coffee. But the coffee is there. It's sort of sitting maybe in the mid, not quite in the background, but in the mid ground, not in the foreground either. But it's definitely there. You do pick it up. But overall, it's a very nice fragrance. Has a lot of the notes that I enjoy, and to me, this is kind of what Shihan should have been. Because I did try that fragrance and I didn't really enjoy it, even though it had a lot of similar notes. This is kind of similar note-wise, and I think it kind of does everything that Shihan was, for me, supposed to do. So worth checking out, Stranger Perfumery. Absolutely fantastic fragrance overall. Now, number 1 fragrance. If you did see my 4 fragrances for life niche edition, you should know what fragrance this is. Part of the reason I picked it is because that was the one fragrance I picked for fall, but also because I really love this fragrance. And of course, that is Single Malt by Kilian. It has this very beautiful, syrupy, sweet, boozy plum in the opening. Now, I get a little bit more of a rye whiskey feel with this fragrance than I do of Scotch. So if you're not a big fan of the smell of Scotch, I wouldn't worry too much. This has a lot more of a syrupy, sweet plum along with a whiskey accord. But again, that whiskey doesn't smell like Scotch. If you want something that smells a lot more like a Scotch whiskey, which I still think smells amazing, try Acro Malt. But this one, again, more like a rye whiskey. It does have a slight bit of a smoky vibe along with a slight bit of a woody vibe. And I think that really does play into the idea of the oak cask that, you know, Scotch whiskies are brewed in, or left to sit in for a long time to soak up that flavor and that aroma. So it does do that really well, but again, not smelling that much like a Scotch whiskey to me, but this one is just so amazing. I mean, I love it. If you like apple brandy, try this one out. I vastly prefer this over apple brandy. I know it's a little bit hard to find, especially an actual bottle of it, but hopefully that won't always be the case. Really, really great fragrance overall. Probably one of my favorite Kilian fragrances, actually, to be honest with you. It's just so nice. It works so well. Anyways, guys, that is my niche edition for the fall fragrances. So do make sure to leave a comment down below. What kind of fragrances are you looking forward to? You know, what do you want to wear this fall? And, you know, hopefully there'll be a few that I can put on the list of fragrances to check out. Always nice to try and sample something new. So anyways, as always, guys, that's going to be it. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.